task for today. I've got a ARB front mount recovery point. I'll just grab it. And the kit supplied by ARB. This is supposedly suitable for 75, 76, 78 and 79 series Landcruisers 2011 onwards. Suitable for vehicles fitted with an ARB bull bar and other manufacturers' bull bars, so presumably like a genuine Toyota bull bar. And whether or not you've got ARB bash plate, which came with, well, mine came with the ARB bull bar anyhow. Fitting instructions, I've read through them. They suggest I may need to loosen up the radiator support mounts. Now that's going to be quite difficult for me, or potentially quite difficult, because I've got the front mount intercooler on and access to the radiator supports is dependent on access through the front mount intercooler. Because I've got to take off that front bash plate underneath to fit the recovery point, I'll take this opportunity also to unspool the winch cable. Excuse me. And the reason I'm going to unspool the winch cable is I've ordered a dynamo rope replacement. It's still rated at about 9,500 kilos. That's in the mail apparently, so while I've got this off, I'll take that fair lead off, the roller one, and the winch cable in readiness for the replacement fair lead tube and the dynamo rope. That's probably it on this video. Suffice to say, why an ARB front mount recovery point? No preference really, other than convenience. So I ring up the ARB store and they had one in stock. Simple as that. Cost for the recovery point, including, you'll see there's a bow shackle there. I've got that. It's I think it's about 4,500 kilo bow shackle, something like that. Both probably about 350 bucks. If I wanted ARB to fit it, it's going to be another 100 bucks. But because I'm in self-isolation, having just returned from overseas, I might as well do it myself, eh? I've now taken the fair lead off and all the winch cable. I've also taken off the bash plate, the plastic radiator surround and bash bar that ARB installed. That's the bash bar. Just thought I'd show you this, the accumulation of crap up here in the radiator. It's only all down the bottom here. Just something to be aware of. I hadn't even noticed it before. So I'll give that a real good clean out before I go too much further. And something else I noticed, a lot of the ARB fitting stuff, I've stuck the bolts back in so I know where they go. You'll see there's a little bit of white on the thread. That's actually Celastic. I suppose they stick that on as an anti-rattle means. I suppose it works, it's still there. But I'm a bit of an old school guy, and I've got some Loctite product. You'll see just over there, that's 243. It's a medium strength nut lock, and could probably use 242 or 241 as well. But that's what I'll be using. But main point of interest here is just that accumulation of crap on the bottom of the radiator. So something to be aware of for you, I don't know about 200 series, but certainly 79 series Landcruiser people. That plastic shroud, the one I've taken off, actually mounts quite flush. Goes, sorry about the camera work here. I'll be able to get it back in at the moment before the bolts and stuff. But it slips back in up that way, and it actually protects a lot of the radiator from airflow. So not quite sure how that stuff in the radiator got there. But something to keep an eye on in the future. Well, that's an accumulation over 5 years, I suppose, so all in all probably not too bad. But anyhow, another thing, when you're changing your ropes on your winch, there's a little grub screw in here. Just be careful of that. When you undo it, it's not very long, it might pop out and disappear, as it did to me, and I found it in the back of the bull bar down here. So just be wary of that. Now I'll come back to you when a bit further along. Before I go too much further, I just wanted to show you where I was at. Now I've set out the parts I've taken off, which is the ARB radiator bash bar, plastic genuine radiator shroud, ARB bash plate. Now in the dustpan, you see all the crap I've pulled out of the bottom of the radiator. It came off reasonably easy. I've just used a banister brush and my hand to get up in there. I've loosely fitted the recovery point. I'll just get into a better vantage point so you can see. So I've got 4 new bolts in here, and there's a long bolt that goes right through the chassis under here. There's a ARB, so there's a torquing sequence, so the bottom 2, those 2, then the one under here, and I'll show you that one. That's in here, and that goes right through the top of the chassis. There's some spacers that fit in between the bolts, there and there. These 2 bolts flash up into the chassis, and there's another spacer up in there as well, so you need to make sure you get the right spacers. The instructions from ARB are a little bit vague, and I've used Loctite 243 on all the bolts anyhow, notwithstanding even the one under here, which has got a nylock nut. There's even some spelling errors in the instructions, but anyhow, they give a good guide. So what I'm going to do from here is I'm going to finish torquing off those bolts on the recovery point, and then I'm going to do a little bit of a cleanup of the bits I've pulled off, including into the winch area. Probably get the gurney in here and give it a good blast, and same with the bash plate and radiator plastic shroud. Give that a good clean, and I'll probably put the ARB radiator bash bar and the plastic shroud back on, but I won't stick the bash plate on until such time as I get the dynamo rope and the new fair lead fair lead for the front of the winch, because there'll probably be better access from underneath without the bash plate for that installation. So the next part of this video will be with the all the parts except the bash plate reinstalled. So this is just an overview, I suppose, and some pitfalls, some advice, I suppose, and perhaps a synopsis or a chronology of what I've done. And I won't touch on pulling off the fair lead tube or the winch cable, because that's relevant for the current video. Pull off your bash plates, the first thing. 4 bolts at the front, 4 bolts at the back. It comes off, there it is on the ground. I'm not going to stick it back on until I've done my winch cable. The next thing is to pull off the plastic radiator shroud. 2 bolts at the front and 2 bolts either side. They're 10mm. That'll come off. Next thing is to pull off this bar here. I think it's an ARB radiator bash bar. That's also what the bash plate mounts onto in here. Rip that off. There's 2 bolts either side. It does assist, if you've got these original tie down points, to also loosen off the top bolt here as well for reinstalling. Once you've got all that kit off, you'll need to, on the left hand side inboard, undo a couple of bolts up here from your bull bar. You'll discard those and put high tensile bolts in. You'll replace the high tensile bolt that goes right through the chassis, depending on the thickness or the length of your chassis. There's 2 bolts supplied. I've got the small one, I think it was about 165 mils long. It's a high tensile bolt, and it has a nylock nut and a washer and a spacer up the top. When installing the recovery point, instructions say to make sure that it's flush up against the chassis. Those two bolts on the side here that you can see where my fingers are, just do them up finger tight. In the last video I said I was going to talk things up. What I actually had to do is, before tightening anything up, once you've got those two bolts in at the top, finger tight, reinstall this bottom bash plate support, because it fits in up in here. There's one tang each side, and the two bolts where your recovery point is, there and there, go right through those tangs into a welded nut on either side. So there wasn't a spacer in there. The tangs filled up that space. So when you do that up, do them up finger tight as well, and the same this other side. And what I've done on the other side is I've actually put in two spacers on the tangs, one at the front here and there's one at the back as well. ARB, as I mentioned previously, seem to use Celastic on their bolts. You can just see a little bit of white on that bolt there. I've used Loctite 243. I think 241, 242 or 243 will be fine. So once the bash plate support bar's in finger tight and all these bolts are in finger tight, then start tightening things up and you should be fine. Once that's all torqued up, then you stick in your rubber shroud, and if you're going to install your bash plate back on, rip it back on as well. What I found with mine is I actually had to trim out some of the radiator shroud as well, and I did that around here, and that's in the instructions as well. So it did say 20 mils by 20 mils. I just used the hole saw on that part, then a little bit of a jigsaw just to flatten it out a bit, because otherwise the shroud comes across there. So you'll need to do that before you tighten anything up. Otherwise, a pretty straightforward installation, and if you don't have pneumatic tools, ratchets or anything like that, it'll probably take you under 2 hours just by swinging spanners. If you had a pneumatic ratchet, they'll probably knock off a bit of time, save a bit of labour and sweat. The bash plates on these, there's two types of bash plates apparently, and against the instructions have some information on that. I've got the hole cut out which will fit that recovery point. There's a diagram which shows that I think it's filled in across here, and you need to cut that out as well if you've got that style bash plate. ARB don't supply a right hand recovery point, and I suppose it's irrelevant anyhow if I'm in that much trouble. The one recovery point's going to have to do. Well, that's it on installing the ARB front recovery point. Catch you later, eh? Hooroo.